Because she suspected she had depression, the girl decided to stop working at the hostess club. She started a new job selling bento boxes. Previously, her regular customers would tease her without restraint.
またしげさんそんなにスタミナつけて、どうすんのよ。
だってさ、今夜もちいちゃん満足させたいじゃん。
She had grown used to it. She always responded with a smile. Whenever this happened, the aunt in the kitchen would make sharp and sarcastic comments.
ありがとうございます。
褒めてないよ。
Chihiro faced many things with a smile, but inside she carried a hollow space shaped by long-term loneliness. Because of her former job, the men in town would occasionally bother her. She was never angered by it and instead joked back with ease. On her days off, she often went to the park alone and would swing with exaggerated poses, trying to cover the loneliness buried deep in her heart. On her way home that day, she saw an elderly homeless man being bullied by some children. She shouted and scared them off, then invited the old man over.
お弁当あるけど食べる？
The bento had originally been prepared for herself, but now she gave it to him. The old man said nothing while eating, and when he encountered pickled plums he didn't dare to eat. He handed them back to Chihiro. Chihiro didn't mind and ate them in one bite, and a bold idea quietly formed in her heart. She brought the old man home to bathe, humming a tune as she gently washed away the dust covering him. When she went to get him a can of beer, she found that he had already packed his things and was ready to leave.
私の服似合ってるね。
She had only been in this town for 2 years, and during these 2 years she treated everything around her with kindness. But this gentleness was not something she was born with. Because her family had fallen apart, she rarely felt her parents' affection when she was young. That day, while she kept her head down eating a rice ball she had squished, a heavily made-up woman watched her quietly from a distance. Hearing the girl whisper that she had ruined the rice ball, the woman picked it up and tasted one too, and her small compliment made young Chihiro beam with joy. When Chihiro was startled by the sound of birds, the woman soothed her with a smile, and that smile was especially gentle. It was the first time she had ever felt kindness from a stranger. On the way home that night, Chihiro mistook her for her mother. She wanted to reach out and hold the woman's hand, but her timid nature kept her from doing so. The woman noticed and naturally took her hand, and the warmth of her palm left a deep impression on the girl's heart. When they parted, she gave the woman her treasured acorn, and the woman handed her a business card in return. The Chihiro written on the card was her stage name, and she was a worker at an entertainment shop. Years later, as an adult, Chihiro had neither a career nor a family. She walked onto a rooftop in despair, and when she saw the signboard above, she suddenly had the idea to become a hostess. When the boss asked what stage name she wanted to use, she answered Chihiro without hesitation, choosing the name that once brought her warmth in a cold night and hoping to pass that warmth on. For some time afterward, she often brought meals to the homeless old man, and the old man took her to a secret spot. It was a condemned building surrounded by warning tape, but at that moment it felt more like a temporary haven that sheltered lonely souls. But these days did not last long, and although Chihiro brought a bento as usual that day, she never saw the old man again. She searched many places afterward but always found nothing. Returning to her daily life, Chihiro still lived with freedom and ease, and her unguarded way of being caught the attention of a girl. The girl secretly followed and photographed Chihiro, curious yet too shy to approach, and when her classmates discovered her secret, they mocked her, saying she's just a hostess. She did not take her classmates' teasing to heart, but quietly remembered the location of that bento shop. After school that day, she arrived at the bento shop early, but when she finally stood face to face with Chihiro, she only dared to lower her head and pretend to be an ordinary customer, carefully hiding the nervousness in her heart. After Chihiro finished taking her order, she suddenly smiled and made a scissor hand gesture. Only then did the girl realize that her behavior had long been noticed, and she did not continue ordering but instead fled the bento shop in panic. The girl's name was Kaneko, and she lived in a wealthy family, but beneath the polished surface was an emotional desert. Her father was always stern, and her mother never cared about what she thought. That day during dinner, when the mother forgot to pour soy sauce for the sashimi, The father froze in one rigid motion, and that suffocating tension lingered for a long time until the mother finally poured the soy sauce, and only then did the stifling atmosphere at the table ease slightly. Affected by such a family environment, she always played a supporting role among her peers, and although she always smiled, she had never truly blended in. She was drawn to Chihiro because Chihiro possessed the freedom and authenticity she longed for the most. That evening, she met Chihiro alone by the seaside, and this time she did not choose to run away, and after quietly taking off her shoes and socks, she gathered her courage and walked toward her.
隣いいですか？どうぞ。
Kaneko thought that strangers usually introduced themselves first, but Chihiro gave her an unexpected answer.
そんなの当てにしたことないもん。え？第一、それが本当のことかどうかわかんないし。風俗嬢ってそういう仕事だったしね。
After speaking, Chihiro gently touched Kaneko's face and told her that if she wanted to understand someone, she only needed to look into their eyes.
なんつって。でも本当にあなたのこと嫌いじゃないよ。
Those simple words were like a beam of light that quietly entered the world Kaneko had suppressed for so long. She saw in Chihiro a completely different possibility, realizing that someone could embrace loneliness with calmness and still live with such freedom and authenticity. During the days that followed, Chihiro continued bringing bento boxes while searching for the old man, and during all those days she never gave up until she walked into an empty alley and finally discovered the old man who had passed away. He was someone on the margins of the city, with no family and no friends, abandoned early by both society and his home, and death had become the quiet and harsh ending for people like him. That night, Chihiro chose to bury him with her own hands, and after everything was done, she cleaned the dirt off her body and quietly finished a bowl of hot ramen. This was not coldness but her way of using genuine warmth to resist the chill that seeped into life from all directions. A few days later, Chihiro was sitting on a bench reading a comic when a mischievous boy approached quietly and tried to scare her with a toy snake. When Chihiro realized it was a prank, she immediately pretended to be angry and grabbed the boy by his collar, and the boy, frustrated, called her an old woman and even took out a compass to stab her when she was off guard. Seeing the blood on Chihiro's hand, the boy froze in shock, but Chihiro suddenly smiled, and instead of blaming him, she took him to buy a bento. Through a simple conversation, Chihiro learned that his name was Makoto, and that he came from a single-parent family, and because his mother often worked night shifts, she returned home only at dawn every day, and the pressure of life caused her to neglect her son, which shaped Makoto's mischievous personality. Hearing this, Chihiro felt a bit of heartache, and Makoto's situation reminded her of her own childhood, except she did not have a mother who cared for her.
それじゃあダメだな。謝るときはちゃんと相手の目見て言わなきゃ。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。ごめんなさい。いい子。
Makoto was not bad by nature, and Chihiro knew he only wanted attention. Because of her, Kaneko and Makoto also became friends, and the three of them went to the seaside together. And Chihiro told Kaneko meaningfully that everyone came from a different planet, which was why people found it difficult to truly understand one another. This sentence revealed the loneliness deep in her heart and also reflected Kaneko's feelings, and although she might never understand her parents completely, many things would eventually be resolved with time. Makoto and Kaneko became unlikely rivals, and even though they were different ages, they still argued endlessly over a math problem. And only after eating the rice balls Chihiro made did they call a temporary truce. But such days did not last long, and soon Makoto's mother angrily came to confront Chihiro, because Makoto kept coming to her place, and the neighbors' gossip grew louder and louder, accusing her of being an irresponsible mother.
そりゃシングルで手の行き届かないところだってありますよ。でもね、これでも精一杯誠の母親としてやれることやってるんです。あなたはそうやって野良犬に餌やってるぐらいの軽い気持ちかもしれないですけど、それで傷つく人間がいるってことぐらい想像できませんか？うちはうちの育て方がありますからほっといてください。
確かに配慮が足りませんでした。不愉快な思いをさせてしまってごめんなさい。
Seeing Chihiro's sincere attitude, Makoto's mother lost her anger for a moment and left reluctantly. Chihiro understood that her identity easily attracted prejudice, and she also understood the anxiety and fear inside a single mother. That night, she went alone to the seaside and found a dead seagull, and its unnoticed passing made her stand there for a long time, and she finally buried the seagull under a pile of stones. She did not know whether one day she would also leave the world in such loneliness, and at that moment she felt uncertain about her own future. But not long after, Makoto's mother came to Chihiro again, because the previous night had been her birthday, and Makoto had used his pocket money to buy her flowers, and since he had never done anything like that in all these years, she assumed Chihiro had encouraged him to do so. Believing it was done to make fun of her and her son, Chihiro handed the flowers over, but the other woman knocked them away without appreciation.
は？何？
これゴミにしたらあんた一生後悔するよ。
は？
どんだけ自分に自信ないんだよ。あの子のこと何も見えてないの。
は？あんたに何がわかんだよ。赤の他人だろうが。
誠はそういう子じゃん。なんで母親なんだかそれ分かってやれないんだよ。他人も家族もないんだよ。もっと見てやんなよ。知らないよ、こんな花束のことなんて。お願い。
At that moment, Makoto's mother wavered in her thoughts, because her anger came more from guilt and insecurity, and after Chihiro's gentle reminder, she finally realized that the son she had overlooked had been loving her silently all along. Giving flowers was not Chihiro's suggestion, it was something Makoto learned from television, and even though his mother was often absent from his life, he still loved her deeply. Besides Kaneko and Makoto, Chihiro had another special friend in the town, an elderly woman named Tae, the owner of the bento shop, who was now hospitalized due to losing her eyesight. For the past 2 years, whenever Chihiro had time, she would visit her, sometimes chatting about daily life, sometimes folding paper to pass the time, but she never revealed who she was. When she returned home that day, an unexpected visitor appeared downstairs, and the woman was Chihiro's former colleague, and the moment they saw each other, they hugged warmly. After several rounds of drinks, the woman finally shared her troubles, because she had trusted her boyfriend too much, and he had taken all her savings under the pretense of opening a shop. After hearing that her friend had to start over, Chihiro leaned gently on her shoulder without offering comforting words, giving her only silent companionship. During the time that followed, the two often spent time together, and that day happened to be the summer festival, and they played the goldfish scooping game at the night market, and while her friend scooped many, Chihiro got none. When she looked up to complain, she suddenly realized that the stall owner was their former shop manager, and the two were moved to exchange updates after seeing each other again. The manager said he had grown tired of living in the shadows, so he wanted a simpler life. Seeing Chihiro chatting and laughing with the manager, a new sparkle appeared in her friend's eyes, and she subtly probed about Chihiro's relationship with him, and her tone revealed a liking for the manager, and not long after, she really went to work for him. One afternoon during lunch break, Chihiro suddenly received a call from her younger brother.
今大丈夫？
何？
母さんが亡くなったよ。
He asked whether she would return home for the funeral, and Chihiro stayed silent for a long time before finally refusing. The answer was not surprising, because the wounds of her childhood had almost severed her ties with her family, and this matter was not about simple right or wrong, but rather the self-protection shaped by her personal experiences. During the days that followed, Chihiro locked herself in her room, and the manager called her out of concern, telling her that she was like a fish sinking to the bottom of the ocean but would one day rise again.
それって死んだら浮かぶって話？
生きてようが死んでようが浮かぶでしょう。もがかなければ浮かぶんだよ。ジタバタするから沈むんだって。
The next day, Chihiro still did not leave her room, and she was surrounded by a heavy gloom but did not want to pass this negativity on to others. So when Kaneko and Makoto tried to check on her, she did not choose to go out and meet them. Perhaps the manager's words took effect, because Chihiro suddenly went to his shop and asked him to take her to her mother's grave. She sat in front of the gravestone for a long time, and the resentment she once carried seemed to be gently carried away by the wind, no longer weighing her down. Before leaving, she placed some acorns there, which was her way of letting go of her mother and making peace with her past self. Afterward, Chihiro curiously asked the manager why he always helped her unconditionally yet never had intentions toward her. And before the manager could answer, she already gave her own conclusion.
やっと見つかった気がするの。
いない。何の話？
店長って私のお父さんだったんだね。
The manager was amused and helpless at her statement but did not deny her view. However, things took an unexpected turn, and after learning that Chihiro had gone out together with the manager, her friends suddenly came to confront her that night and immediately questioned her aggressively.
どうして二人で出かけたこと黙ってたの？
ああ、別にバジネに話すようなことかな。
何それ？結局好きなんでしょ？店長のこと。
過去形にしないでよ。私はバジネに一度も嘘ついたことないよ。
Her friend refused to listen to Chihiro's explanation, believing that even if Chihiro saw things that way, the manager might still have different thoughts, and their differing values became painfully clear. The friendship that once warmed both of them was now on the verge of collapse, and unable to bear the baseless suspicion, Chihiro finally asked her to leave. Afterward, she went to see the owner Tae, and even though she had never revealed her identity, the blind Tae still recognized her.
なんだか不倫してるみたいね。
まあ、それより駆け落ち？
When Chihiro asked how she knew, Tae did not answer directly, because she could feel the overwhelming loneliness within Chihiro like a silent tide. So every time she could recognize her clearly. That night it was also raining, and Chihiro saw Tae sitting in the shop happily even though there were no customers, and touched by her joy, her footsteps moved toward her almost involuntarily.
今日はこんなお天気だから、借りたら一つサービスね。
嬉しい。でもどうしてこんな日にお店開けてるんですか？
私ね、嵐の夜ってなんだか無性に出かけたくなるの。なんかこうワクワクしない？
Tae's playfulness made Chihiro feel at ease, so when Tae asked about her work, she was completely honest without hiding anything. Tae did not show dislike or rejection and continued chatting with her as before, and it was this attitude that allowed Chihiro to feel warmth from a stranger for the second time. So after Tae was hospitalized, she chose to work at the bento shop. Chihiro talked about the recent events and also mentioned her mother's passing, and with Tae quietly listening, she let go of all her defenses and revealed the vulnerability buried deep in her heart.
もしタエちゃんが私のお母さんだったら、私はどんな大人になってたんだろうな。
そうね。でも今より素敵な人にはなってないんじゃない？
え？
私はね、今のあなたがとっても好きよ。
Hearing these words, a faint ache rose within Chihiro, and she suddenly realized that even with her difficult past, the person she was now should not be denied. Tae understood and accepted all of her, including her loneliness and her past, and afterward Tae gave Chihiro a warm embrace, and that simple gesture quietly soothed her heart and gave Chihiro the courage to begin again. This was not an ordinary moment of sharing and comfort but a confirmation of the soul. To celebrate Tae's discharge from the hospital, Chihiro gathered everyone she knew, including the friend she had argued with. Her friend later confessed her feelings to the manager, and the two eventually came together. The gathering lasted from day until night, and when everyone was happily chatting, Chihiro chose to leave quietly, and although she did not say goodbye to anyone, the blind Tae sensed her departure and called her afterward.
ねえ、どうして私が帰ったって気づいたの？
だって寂しい気配がスッてしなくなったんだもん。そりゃ気づくわよ。
どこか遠くに行こうかなって思ってる？
え？
もういいんじゃない？どこにも行かなくても。あなたならどこにいたって孤独を手放さずにいられるわ。
Tay's phone call was clear and warm, making Chihiro understand that she, too, was loved by someone. At the end of the story, Chihiro went to another city and began a new life at a cattle farm. When asked about her past, she simply said that she once worked at a bento shop. And this was not an evasive answer but her way of letting go of the past and truly making peace with herself. What her future would be like remained unknown, but the loneliness within her had become far less important with this new beginning. Some say that growing up is a process of endlessly saying goodbye to past versions of oneself, and Chihiro's growth was completed through a series of farewells. She said goodbye to her first job and understood the prejudices brought by the name Chihiro. She said goodbye to the old homeless man and learned to accept life's sudden departures. She said goodbye to Makoto and Kaneko and planted seeds of kindness in their hearts. She said goodbye to Aunt Tay and received warmth born from unconditional acceptance. Her departure was not an escape but a step toward herself, and she finally understood what Aunt Tay meant. No matter where you go, you cannot leave behind the loneliness in your heart, and since there is nowhere to escape, then walk with it. The film itself is not a story about loneliness being cured but about the reconciliation and acceptance of a lonely soul. Perhaps people do come from different planets and are destined to never fully understand one another, but those brief and sincere encounters are enough to remain unforgettable. So there is no need to force complete understanding, because the small acts of kindness in life are the truest warmth of all.